Sorry I was making this one long video, but then classes were changing and it got a little noisy in the hallway, so we'll break it up a little bit. A couple more definitions about experiments. So in an experiment, one type is called the controlled experiment. In a controlled experiment, there are two groups that are studied. All the conditions are exactly the same except for something called the treatment. So that's only changing one variable. Now the treatment, as I said, is the thing that's being given to only one group or sample. The treatment group, obviously, is the group that receives the treatment, and the control group is the group that doesn't. So one group is receiving a treatment, the control group does not. Now, ideally, neither of those know which group is which. So if it's, especially when you're talking people or animals and whatnot, they don't know that they're receiving a treatment or that they're not. So often for control groups, you give them a placebo, which is off. If you're talking medicine, it's often just like a sugar pill or something that's not going to drastically affect their health. So that they think they might be receiving something, and maybe they'll improve based on what we call the placebo effect, which we'll talk later. Or maybe those in the treatment group aren't improving, and they think that they have the placebo. Ideally, you don't want people in either group to know which is which. Now, we also need to identify the differences between experiments and observations. Well, we already defined it, but we should also take a look at some examples. So you need to pick which side of the which side you agree with, whether you think it's an experiment or an observation. So if you take a few seconds, pause the video, go through these on your own, figure out whether you think it's an observation or an experiment. Pause the video now and come back in a few seconds. And clearly you paused the video, so we'll just keep going. A researcher wants to know whether or if a soil additive makes a fern grow more quickly. He grows one specimen in treated soil and one in untreated soil. That is an experiment. The researcher is actively changing something. So it's not just sitting back and waiting. It's like you're contributing something, especially if you use the word treated. I mean, that's a pretty good indicator. Letter B, it says to find out whether car accidents are more likely on rainy days, a researcher records weather conditions for 50 randomly selected accidents for the past year. That is going to be an observation for a couple different reasons. First of all, the treatment in this case would be rainy days. And I don't know about you, but I don't know of anybody that can control the rain. So they can't control that. Also, you're not going to necessarily, even if you could control it, you're not going to put people in a situation where they could possibly be in more accidents. That's unethical. So you're not, this is just going to be an observation. Letter C, a scientist measures the height of 20 birds' nests, counts the number of eggs to see if there's a relationship. Is this an experiment or an observational study? This is also an observation for a couple different reasons. First of all, the scientist is not going to be building the nests, nor is he going to be, he or she, going to be moving the nest to higher up or lower down in a tree or putting random eggs in there. They're not changing anything. They can't change anything. That'd be bad if they did. So that is just simply an observation. So a couple different things there we need to pay attention to. Again, if you can control something, you got to question yourself whether it's a good idea to or not. Also, if you can't control anything, then you're just going to have to sit back and observe. All right. Also, breaking down some experience more, we've got to identify the treatment group, and the control group in given experiments. I'd like you to take a few seconds in this one as well to identify which you think is which. So read through the example, and I'll read through it in a minute after you're done. So please pause the video now. And now that you're back, because you obviously paused. So we've got 100 arthritis sufferers reported the severity of their symptoms daily for a month. 50 of the subjects were given the Epsom salt to bathe in at least once every other day. And at the end of the month, 30% of the subjects who used Epsom salt reported a decrease in severity of their symptoms compared to 5% in the other group. So the treatment is the Epsom salt. The treatment group is those who bathed in the Epsom salt. Sorry. And the control group is those who didn't. The 50 who didn't. So the 50 who didn't, they may have been bathing in something that and maybe it's just bathing in sugar, which actually you got to be careful with that. You don't want to accidentally make it so that they are bathing in something that could affect it. I should be a little more specific in the treatment group, sorry. You should say the 50 who bathed in Epsom salt, and the other group would be the 50 who didn't. And for the last thing, this is something I'd like you to do with the groups or with those around you. So you're going to take a few seconds, pause, and then discuss the people around you about these things, whether you think they should be an observation or whether you think they should be an experiment. And one thing I want you to keep in mind is whether you think it's ethical to do an experiment or if you should just simply sit back and observe. So take a few seconds, pause the video now, discuss with those around you whether you think they should be observations and experiments, and defend your answer. And then you can restart this video in a minute. Okay, now that you're done with that, I'll go through what I think. So does using tanning beds at least twice a month affect the likelihood of developing skin disease? That, I think, should be an observation. Especially if it's something that's like, okay, the potential outcome of this is skin disease. You're not going to force somebody to do something that could potentially cause them harm. So you want to always consider that. Number 2, it says, do people who consume 100 milligrams of vitamin C each day as a dietary supplement have lower cholesterol levels than those who do not consume vitamin C supplements? This one I could see making an argument either way. I'm going to say this is an experiment. This one, it wouldn't be a bad idea for you to encourage people to take the vitamin C to see if it improves their health. So that's kind of the main difference between 1 and 2. Number 1, it's like if you were to do that as an experiment, you could potentially harm people. Number 2, as an experiment, you could potentially help people. Number 3, this one, it kind of depends on your environment. I'm going to say this one's going to be an observation. You could ask people whether or not they ate breakfast and see how they did with their ACT scores. But you could also do this as an experiment. Now, obviously, ACT scores and SAT scores affect people's college chances and college scholarships and whatnot. So you got to be careful if you're going to do this as an experiment. But maybe have one person do the ACT one time without eating breakfast, and the next time that they do it with eating breakfast, and kind of compare the 2 scores. For this one, I would probably encourage an observation just because you don't want to potentially harm somebody's chances of doing well. Number 4, do children who walk before their first birthday score higher on standardized tests? That one's going to have to be an observation. I'll write it up here. You can't really control whether they're walking before their first birthday or not. You can encourage it, but you can't really control. Number 5, does exercise lower your cholesterol? That one, it would be okay if you do it as an experiment. Again, you'd be controlling something that could potentially help them. Number 6, is Tylenol a better pain reliever than the Meyer pain reliever caplets? That one you could do as an experiment. Again, these both have the potential to help. One might help more than the other. That's really what you're checking. Number 7, does living with a smoker increase your chances of obtaining lung cancer? That needs to be an observation. You can't force somebody into a situation which could potentially hurt their health. Last one, does a lack of calcium in one's diet increase their chances of bone cancer? Again, that one should be an observation, because you're not going to say, okay, we're going to remove calcium from your diet and see if you get bone cancer. It's like, you might want to just observe people that have a little calcium in their diet versus people that have more calcium in their diet. You're not going to want to try to give someone cancer. So always consider the ethics behind things when you're considering whether it should be an observation or an experiment.